Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning to you, although you're in study hall probably, and hopefully you'll be able to watch this over the weekend and get caught up with the video. So again, I hope you're having a good productive day. So let's go ahead and get at it. So what we're going to do, and this is for both sections, we're actually going to start with point 5 under Roman numeral 2. So we're looking at the supply curve in a competitive market. We're going to look at the upward slope of a long run supply curve. And what that's going to do is it's going to, we're going to do something actually we've never done before. We're going to put two graphs together, and we're going to kind of talk about 3 different phases, and then talk at the very, very end as to what might actually pull a supply curve up. So just kind of bear with me. So we're going to start kind of like short run to long run and then kind of eventually bend it up. Now, what we did yesterday on Wednesday is we looked at a condition whereby if we had a price increase, we had more firms, we had greater quantity, then at some point, right, that greater quantity drives down price, right, then we have fewer firms, so on and so forth, right? And what we called that was really the competition cycle. Okay, so we got that accomplished. This is really an extension of that. So when we talk about getting the upward slope of a long run supply curve, we're going to do a little bit more of the groundwork, all right? And then we're going to make sure I'm still on here. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about why it might bend up. And then I'm just going to do kind of a little bit of a tweak there in the end. So we've already looked at the surface. So, okay, so let's go ahead and put a couple of these graphs together, all right? So what we're going to do, give yourself some space in your notes, all right? So, and some of this you should be very, very comfortable with. Okay? Maybe I'll let this drag here a little bit more than otherwise have. Okay. All right, now we're going to assume that these are pretty much measured together. So I'm going to take this price line and I'm going to take it all the way across, right? So essentially it's the same line, all right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a short-term supply curve, all right? I'm going to put in a demand curve. It's going to hit that point. Hopefully it'll hit it. Imagine these being straight lines, of course, as always. Okay. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, let's go with some brown here. All right. Not perfect. That's an average total cost curve. Let me throw in a, let's use some pink if I can get it to show up. I don't think I can. It's supposed to be all in the same line. That's a little too, well, that'll work. Okay. Okay, now, by the way, it's all kind of set up the same way as you would imagine. This is price, this is quantity, price. Okay, the difference, in fact, let's maybe use a little orange. Hopefully it'll show up here, all right, is that this is all short run and this is all long run, okay? And just for a little overkill, I'm going to call this the initial condition, okay? And really what we're doing is, again, this is just an extension of what we did on yesterday, on Wednesday, okay? All right, so, and you know, just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and remind ourselves this is price, and maybe I'll drop let's use a little light brown here. Okay, we'll just call it Q1, it really doesn't matter. Okay, short run to long run. So what we're doing is we're tying the two together, okay? And again, if we took that competition life cycle out quite some time, 2 or 3 years, we eventually move from this to this. Now again, we're gonna make this a little dynamic here. All right. Okay. So let's say, for instance, right, that we have an increase in demand and we find, right, as we had mentioned, let's say this is milk. Let's go back to the milk example. Milk is curing cancer, right? Well, if milk is curing cancer, right, in that demand curve, we're going to call this demand 2. It's going to cheat a little bit into here, right? That demand curve is going to move to the right. People are going to demand more milk because right now, hey, it's curing cancer, right? Okay, so let's take that over, all right? The price line moves up, right? And now we've got a new quantity, okay? Now, remember what you already know from what we did yesterday, of course. If total revenue is P times Q, you know the total revenue, right, is going to increase for the entire market, right? And again, milk is, we're still in competition. Later on today, right, in this video, we will get into monopolies, okay? But we'll just kind of go with what we got for now. All right, now, the best way to look at essentially what's happening here as we find out milk's curing cancer, this is a short run increase in demand, okay? But over here, we've got to do something, okay? Let's go with a little bit of light blue here, all right? We've got a new point here, all right? So, all right? Remember what we talked about yesterday, okay? Now, we talked about enter and exit, right? Price line, okay? Now, because of this increase, right, in demand, right, price is going to move up, right? By the way, we have not moved supply, right? We have not moved supply. But now, right, something's different here, okay? What we're going to have to do, right, is adjust a little bit, right? Adjust a little bit, right? In the long run, right? We saw the point move up a little bit. Okay, now, sticking to what we know about the, let's see, let's go with a little blue here. Know what we know about, right? Demand increasing in the short term because milk is curing cancer. I mean, not causing cancer, go the other way. Right? If it's curing cancer, right? Now we know price went up, more firms are going to get up, so now we've got to move, and hopefully I'll hit this point right. Right? It's going to cheat a little bit onto this too. Let's make sure we got that as 1. Okay. I'll tell you what, just in case you want to take a still shot of this. All right. So again, now, again, this is all short run over here on the left, right? Well, now supply has increased. The price is going to come down, right? And now we're going to be, let me drop it down here a little bit further. Now we're going to be at Q3, all right? Price went up, then it came down, okay? Now, remember, total revenue, right, between, let's call this point 1 and point 2. In fact, let's just do that, all right? Let's call this point 1. Actually, no, we're going to call this point 3. We'll call that one point 2. Just sticking with what we did on Wednesday, all right? Between 1 and 3, total revenue for the industry is going to be greater at 3 than it is for 1. Total revenue for the industry is going to be greater at 2 than it is 1, right? We know that, okay? If I ask you the question between 2 and 3, we simply don't have enough information yet, right? I haven't given you the actual points, and I haven't given you the quantities. And again, it's total revenue equals price times quantity. You get that kind of thing. Okay, but what's interesting, right, is actually, let's see, don't trip, oh, we were using light blue there, okay, is if we started here, right, we're probably going to wind up back in the same place, right? So in the long run, we're back to that sweet spot, okay? And again, in the long run, we will have to adjust, all right, again, okay? Now, again, if you think about where this average total cost curve, notice even though we had short-run changes in supply and demand, and that's really what I want you to see here, short-term changes in supply and demand, right? That average total cost curve really didn't move, right? Because think about what's happening, all right? We talked a little bit about this on Wednesday. The cost of producing milk didn't go up, all right? It didn't go up. Now, you might make the argument, well, you know, over the long run, if you're creating greater supply, some of your costs are going to go up, right? Because they're going to be variable costs, right? Associated with production, okay? We're, to a certain degree, kind of sidestepping that point, though. All right, but in the long term, right, we really didn't make this graph dynamic. We adjusted a little bit and then came back down, but we didn't move the average total cost curve in the long run. So essentially what you want to see here is the short run, right, much more greater changes, I should say, you know, that we depicted, okay? But nonetheless, in the long run, things kind of all even out. Now, one of the things we haven't really spent a whole lot of time talking about with these two graphs together is really how many firms entered and left the market, but we really don't need to do that. Okay. Now with that said, okay, one of the things that can be said about a market here, all right, a competitive market, and again, this is something new, so this is something we're just kind of throwing in here now, all right? That on this side, in fact, let me go ahead and mark it off here. All right? When you get into the long run, okay, this actually winds up being a supply curve, right? So it's actually not your marginal cost curve, it actually winds up being your price line. All right? It actually winds up being your price line. Okay, again, everything kind of just evens out in the end. Okay, now what I want to do is just kind of finishing off this point, right? And let me use maybe some green for this one, all right? What's eventually going to pull this back up and get it to mirror the marginal cost curve, and I'll back up a little bit just to kind of let you know. It's like in the long run, this price line winds up being your supply curve, because remember, you're a price taker, right? So, you know, if you're producing milk, so is everybody else, right? That's the idea. Well, it's going to pull this back up, right? Now remember, if it's like this, right, it's elastic. If it's like this, it's inelastic. Okay. What's going to pull this back up? They're just two factors that I want you to get down, all right? So you might think, well, my gosh, you know, to increase total revenue, in fact, we'll go ahead and put that on the board just for the heck of it, right? You know, total revenue equals P times Q, right? So if I can, even if the price is going to stay constant over time, right? It went up and then went back down, right? And by the way, we didn't talk about firms going in and out, so, all right? Then, even if we increase quantity, total revenue is going to increase. You might think, well, my gosh, I'll just produce as much as I want. Okay, so what is actually going to make this inelastic and pull that sucker back up? All right, two factors. One is that there's always going to be a limit on resources. Milk, how many cows, how much feed can you get, how much barn space do you have? No matter what, there's always going to be some limitations, right, on your resources, right? Farmland is always going to be limited, all right? And the second, and this gets us kind of back to what we were kicking around on Wednesday, all right, is that there are just going to be some firms, right, that aren't going to be able to stick around because they're cost structures, right? So remember when we were talking about the long run, in fact, I think I had it kind of over here on the board, we were talking about uneven technology and uneven cost structures. Not all firms are going to be able to stay in. Okay, but with this up here, in fact, let me use maybe a little light green. Hopefully it'll show up on the camera. Is that basically, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, we just didn't give it a name, right? Now we're going to give it a name. The firm that stays in, gets out, back and forth, and it may be the same firm or many firms, right? This is the marginal firm that just can't quite cut it. Right? They just can't quite cut it because the cost structures in the long term, right, are not going to be the same. Different firms invest in different things, and some firms get it right, some don't. All right. Remember, your most efficient firms are the ones that can reduce costs to the point where they can clear everybody out, right? But again, that's only going to be in the long run, right? That's only going to be in the long run. So maybe a little overkill in terms of how we got to that point, right? But nonetheless, I think it shows, right? Tying the short run into the long run, right? So again, this is really, really overkill, but I think I'm using the same color too, all right? Because that price went up and went down, right? This is in a nutshell, right? The competition cycle. It's basically kind of what we did there. And we just moved demand once and we moved supply once, right? Just kind of moving it on. But notice in the end, right, we wound up at the same price, right? Now, the last thing that I want you to get down in your notes, by the way, is this, right? You kind of put a line in your notes, although the outline kind of does it for you, so this is admittedly overkill, is the fact that this is everything we talked about so far. That's all competition. Now we're going to shift gears and look at monopoly. So everything we talked about so far is a competitive market. Everything so far. Okay? So make sure you get a good picture of that. All right? And we'll go ahead and move on. So let me go ahead and get rid of this because we'll need a little bit of board space. We're not going to do as much drawing. And as I had said to you, I'll just talk while I'm erasing it. As I had said to you on Wednesday and Monday, for that matter, and actually when we started the chapter, because you did take your exam Monday, we're going to be in this chapter for a while. It's going to kind of seem like an odyssey. Okay, so let's talk about monopolies, all right? So we looked at essentially competition way over here. Now we're changing huge mega gears, right? And we're over here looking at monopolies, okay? So, essentially what we're looking at is one very powerful firm, right? One very powerful firm. Okay, I'm going to take a time out here real quick.